Okay, so what we've done up to this point is we went ahead and rolled on a couple of filler coats. So, you know, we got a couple of boats working here, 14 and 17, one's for, you know, row and sail, one's for just row. This boat here we're going to do in bright work just to show you how all that's going to look when it's done. So we rolled on enough. On this one it was pretty much 3 filler coats because I do them thin. You know, I like to layer them on thin instead of big globs, right? So high density roller, just epoxy mixed up good and clear, roll it on. It's almost 100 degrees around here, so slow is definitely the way to go. This has been sitting overnight since the last coat. I'm being very careful here because, as you saw, we took all the forms out underneath, and there's virtually nothing holding this up except for the stem form and the transom jig. And I'm about to call somebody in here to give me a hand. So you want to be careful when you're taking the forms out, one at a time, knock them out. The last thing you're going to do is in the front you've got a screw holding your stem on, in the back you got a couple of screws holding your transom jig on. Those are the last things. Matter of fact, I just took them out before we turned the cameras on. So those are out. Somebody's going to walk in here and we're going to flip this boat over. Make sure you got gloves on, because, you know, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, that fiberglass along the edges is sharp, sharp, sharp. All right, so put some gloves on and we're going to go ahead and flip this boat. Now this particular boat is probably around 60 pounds or so as it sits right now at the most. So you know, be gentle, make sure your workspace is clear because you got to put it down. You don't want to put it down on a bunch of junk and garbage. All right, so see, why don't you come in here and give me a hand, and we're going to flip this boat over. All right, so we're going to roll this way. So, you know, one hand up here on the going along the keel, the other one along the bottom, and firmly and with passion, we're going to bring it down. There you go. Well, that's a beautiful boat. So you can see we're pretty much still in a fragile state at this point. So you want to be really, really careful with it. We're going to go ahead and set up our, we got a little cradle that we're going to put on here, which allows us to put the boat in so that we can continue working. And then we're going to pull out the rest of these. Now we can pull out the stem form and the transom jig, and we start the whole process again. We start sanding and we get ready to fiberglass. So I'm going to go ahead and set up that cradle now. We got the boat flipped, and as you can probably see on the inside here, we did a first round of sanding, or just a rough sanding, right? Again, it's just like the outside. The idea with the first round of sanding is what you want to do is, you know, get it fairly smooth so that you can find where the little potholes are that you're going to have to fill, right? Because if you don't do that and you start to fill stuff, it becomes really thick and more difficult to sand out. The cradle that we're using here is real simple. This is just a 2x4 with a couple of members coming up like that to hold it straight. This is cargo strapping that you can get almost anywhere. And I just simply use screws to hold it on each side, and it's longer than I need so I can raise or lower the boat as I'm working. It makes the whole process a whole lot simpler, so I highly recommend that. Using the same roll around supports that I use for the strong back. And I tied 2x4s, as you saw. I tied 2x4s going across from one to the other. Now the reason for that is so that as I move the boat, right, because I'm still working and moving the boat, it moves as a unit instead of, you know, one and the other. Okay, so now we've got a few maintenance tasks to do before we start fiberglassing the inside of the boat. This particular boat, and pretty much all the Whitehauls in the Weary series, is going to have or very similar things that you need to do to it. The stem, you're going to clean that out, and remember, best sander you have doesn't plug in, right? So you're going to have to hand sand most of this and get it down. It's cedar, it'll sand down real quick. And then the stem piece comes down and stops fairly abruptly here. All right, well, these boats, they're still at a peak at that point, right? So what are the options? The options were we could have kept the stem coming down further. That would have created a situation as we were doing our stripping. Or we could have stopped where we did, and that creates a little situation here that we need to take care of. So kind of 6 one, half dozen the other. I prefer to do it this way. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix and thicken some epoxy, and we're going to continue and feather this down to right around here, to right to where it starts to become a nice smooth curve, because I said it before, say it again, fiberglass cloth doesn't like sharp corners, and that's in fact what we have here is a sharp corner. So we're going to fill that in, and that's going to give us an opportunity to feather this inner stem about another 1.5 feet or so down here. None of it's critical, so it's not like you need a measurement to do that. Cleaning out the inner stem, one of the best ways to do that is just a 1/2-inch chisel, nice and sharp, and you're going to take it and you're going to scrape, and that should get off most of the little glue pieces or any pieces of tape that may be in there. Take your time. If you do this right, you know, the initial sanding in here and cleaning up the stem and cleaning up back there, you know, it's probably going to take you about 6 or 7 hours. You know, it just take your time, enjoy it, and just take it one little piece at a time. Okay, so that takes care of pretty much what we're going to be doing down here. Let's go down and talk about the transom now. All right, so down at the transom, kind of the same thing, but a little bit different. Our boat's still in kind of a fragile state here, right? So we still have to be careful, particularly around the transom. Everything's all sanded, and I'm going to tell you all this, the first 4 or 5 inches is all hand sanded and sanded up here on the transom itself, and we still have a little bit more to do. Again, I chose to use some 3/4 inch plywood that I had hanging around here, and then I'm going to cap it off with some skins on the back. And I'm going to put a cap up here. If you're doing this, and hopefully you are, and let's say you got a kit from us or whatever, this is likely going to be solid wood. So some of these steps won't be necessary, like taking care of capping this off and all, but this will be necessary. You need to create structural point between the transom and the actual boat, right? And we've done stuff similar to this already. What we're going to do is we're going to draw a bead coming all the way up here, and make a nice clean fillet, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And if you remember right, when we talked about my little transom knee here, I told you were going to have to trust me, and that there were some of you at home that were going to tell me that that's not a transom knee, it's too tiny. Well, now you can see that there actually was a method to my madness. This transom knee, because of the way we designed it, basically fills this corner down here, so as we do our fillet coming up through here, this transom knee is pretty much going to disappear. So it's going to do the job, but it's pretty much going to fade away into oblivion down there. And what that allows me to do is it gives me nice smooth curves going all the way up through here, so that I can fiberglass down, fill in that corner, and everything will be really, really nice and strong down in there. Okay, and then I'm going to come down here to the inner skeg bedding here, and I am going to again draw a bead where it connects to the side of the hull, so that I fill all that in nicely, and we don't have any sharp corners for our fiberglass. And I'm going to continue down all the way down here, and I'm going to make a nice bead. And when we put this in, we already sanded that over. So the object of the game here is we want to get this so that when we lay our fiberglass down here, that it goes right past this without a hitch. You know, there's no, it won't be pulling or puckering or going into any holes or anything. So we need to make that nice and smooth, and we're going to do that. Matter of fact, we're going to do that today. Okay, once we do all that and that sets and it dries with your extra epoxy, your thickened epoxy, you're going to go around and you're going to fill in a lot of these little holes that we got going on here. Maybe your center strip wasn't perfect and you got some filling to do there, or maybe a couple of your strips had a tear out with your bead and cove or whatever it was. It's inevitable. You're going to have that on every boat you ever do. There's always going to be 1 or 2 little things. In this case, I probably have 4 or 5 little things. So we're going to fill all those in, and then that'll dry and this will dry, and then we're going to come back, and that's when we start hand sanding everything down with our finger, right? And we start getting into the corners, because then we're getting ready to do some fiberglassing. All right, well, enough talking about it. Time to do it. So I'm going to start mixing up some epoxy. I'm going to put that in a 60cc plunger, and we're going to start doing some fillets. Now, one of the great things about working with a cradle is I can raise or lower the boat as I'm working on it, right? So, you know, some of this is backbreaking stuff because you're leaning over the boat for so long. So, you know, I tend to lower it really low when I'm doing my sanding. But if I'm going to be working down that stem doing a fillet, I'm going to pull the transom right up in the air. And then when I'm done and that's set enough so that it won't run, I'm going to drop that down. I'm going to raise that end up and drop this end down so I can work on my transom, all right? So cradle's a beautiful thing. Go ahead and build that. All right, I'm going to start mixing some epoxy so we can get this done. All right, so I got my epoxy mixed. Just take a little spoon here, dab some in the cracks. Try to be as neat as possible. And again, I'm going to be coming out about 16, 18 inches or so. Just enough so I can get down to a smooth transition from one side of the hull to the other. I've got a piece of cut spreader behind me that I'm going to use to spread all this out. Because I don't want to create the indentation that the spoon will create. So let me just do that. All right. So it's just kind of like spreading it like it's on a cake. And the better you can make this transition, the less hand sanding you're going to have to do. All right, this end's a little bit different technique. You're going to be using the syringe. I'm going to start down here at the base of the knee. I'm going to work my way up, trying to make it as smooth as possible. Get some air bubbles in there. And I'll be coming back with the spoon. Okay, so I'm going to do that to the other side. And again, it's easier to start down by the knee and to drag up. And this, for this 60cc plunger, is about 1.5 ounces. All right, so I got a little extra in there, so I'll just come down the edge here till I run out. Try to make it as even as possible. I'm not going to have enough to do the whole thing. My plan, basically, is to get this done nice and neat. I'll come back and finish that up later. But I want to get this done because I want to start laying glass in here on the fillet so that we can strengthen this up. So I can lay glass on that and continue to do that all the time. It's all about time management when you get to this point. All right, so I need a spoon. All right, you know the routine from here. I'll try to be as neat as possible. All right. Well, that's it. That's the long and the short of it. So I'm just going to keep working this, making it as pretty and as neat as I possibly can. And then, after that's dry, we'll hand sand most of it and start to lay some glass on there.